Bonjour, French one. I'm about to give you the rest of our adjective agreement story for this section. The reason why we're covering this as the last topic of the section is because it's the least emphasized on your test. So when I show you all of these crazy exceptions, and I know you already have a pretty good list of exceptions to that rule of when something's feminine, you add an E. Whenever you're describing multiple masculine people, you add an S. And when you're describing feminine groups, then you just add an ES to your describing words. When you notice how different these are and you start kind of complaining in your head and thinking about how many exceptions you learn to that very simple rule, keep in mind that you will not have to have these memorized for the test. I simply want to kind of expose you to them, make you aware that they exist so that if you see some kind of strange spellings, you're not totally caught off guard. The good news is between these three adjectives, there is kind of a pattern that happens. So the first thing I need to point out to you is that the M here is standing for masculine, the F on each chart is standing for feminine, MP stands for masculine, plural, FP stands for feminine and plural, and then finally this weird MV one over here stands for if you have a masculine word that starts with a noun, or with a vowel, sorry. I'll explain to you why you need that here in just a moment. So let's start with the word for handsome and beautiful, because I think we actually had this on our notes. The word for handsome is beau. And the reason why this is highly irregular is because when you look at the feminine form, you don't add an E to the masculine form. It's not just doubling the last letter before you add it. It's crazy irregular. The feminine form is belle. So it's one of those things where you kind of just have to memorize it. If you're describing a boy who's good looking, you use beau. If you're describing a girl who's good looking, you would use belle. So the place where it gets even crazier, though, is when you go from the masculine form to the masculine plural. Up till now, I've always taught you that you just take that masculine form, you add an S to it. But the reason why this is on the highly irregular list is because you don't actually add an S to it. You add an X to make it masculine and plural. Kind of strange, right? For your feminine plural, it at least follows the pattern. You take that really weird feminine form, so if you can at least remember the feminine form, you're in good shape, and you add an S to it. So if you're describing a bunch of good-looking girls, you'll describe them as belle, and I know you don't hear the difference, but you can see the S being added to it. Now, in the odd event that you have a masculine word that starts with a vowel, the reason why you can't use beau like this and just have one masculine form, and the reason why you need a special form if the word starts with a vowel, is because if you'll notice these end in a vowel sound, and you know French people usually don't like a word ending in a vowel sound followed by a word that starts with a vowel. So if you're about to follow that word beau with something that starts with a vowel, like, I don't know, ordinateur is computer, or élève is student if there's a handsome student, things like that, you don't want the vowel sounds butting up right next to each other. But it's not as simple as like whenever we have je or something that's a really short word where we can just drop a vowel. If you'll notice, if we drop the U, you're faced with the A. If you drop the A, you're faced with the E. So they just basically created an entire new form, and that's the word belle. So if you have a handsome male student, then you have a belle élève, but it's spelled this way. Now that problem doesn't occur here with the feminine form because even though there's an E here, you don't hear it. It ends in the consonant sound of le. So I know that's really strange, and I know that might be a lot to cover in just 30 seconds there. So if you want to, you can just memorize that if you happen to have a word that's masculine and starts with a vowel sound, you need to use this very special form of handsome, which is belle. Once you learn this, though, the other two are very, very similar. Take a look. The word new for masculine things that are new, such as, I don't know, a new desk or a new book, is the word nouveau. See how it ends in the EAU just like beau does? And then see how when you go to the feminine form, you have to change it to nouvelle, just like how beau went to belle, nouveau goes to nouvelle. So it kind of follows a pattern. It's just a pattern amongst these three highly irregular ones. Just like how when you went from the masculine singular beau to the plural by adding an X, again, very strange. If you have a bunch of new books, you actually add an S to that masculine form of nouveau, just like how you did beau. And for the feminine form, if you have a bunch of new cars, for example, because car happens to be feminine, you take that irregular nouvelle feminine form and you add an S to it. And then just like up here, how this really strange masculine words that start with a vowel sound kind of thing was really just the feminine form without the extra L and the E. Guess what? The one for nouvelle, for nouveau, sorry, rather, is nouvelle, which is when you take that feminine form and you drop the L and the E. Again, the reason why you had to create it is because you couldn't just use nouveau in front of something that started with a vowel. If you had nouveau ordinateur, for a new computer, the O and then the O in ordinateur would butt up next to each other. So if you do have something that starts with a vowel that's masculine, like ordinateur, you'll have to use nouvelle like that. All right, last one is the word old. Now with this, we're not talking about old for people. We learned that word. It's âgé. We're talking about if you have an old object, such as an old book or an old car, if we're sticking with that pattern. The word old in its original masculine form for describing objects is vieux. And then whenever you have to change it, now the thing that's different about this is it's not quite that EAU ending, but when you change it to that feminine form, it still has that double LE ending, but look, there's an extra I. This one's kind of crazy. For that feminine form of old, if you have an old car, it's a vieille voiture is how that's pronounced. When you go to the masculine plural form now, think about this. Every other time we've been adding an X, but this one already has an X, so you actually don't have to add another X. The masculine and the masculine plural form are both vieux. So if you have a bunch of old books, you have a bunch of vieux livres, and you don't actually hear the difference when you pronounce it, whether it's old book or old books. For the feminine form, if you have old cars, you take that really weird vieille form and you add an S to it. And then just like your other ones, in order to get that really weird masculine before vowel one, if you have an old computer, you actually take that feminine form and drop that extra L and E, and you end up with vieille. And vieille ordinateur would be an old computer. Very strange forms, so I want to reiterate again, you will not have to have these memorized for your test. They will use them sometimes in sentences, so you need to be vaguely familiar with the words for new and old and handsome and know that they can look a little bit different than your average adjectives, but you won't actually have to be able to produce these on your test. So when I show you these examples, relax. You won't have to do anything crazy like this. You might see sentences like this on your test, and you'll have to be able to understand them. J'ai une vieille voiture means I have an old car. Again, old is in that crazy irregular feminine form because car is feminine. Ils ont une nouvelle maison is they have a new house. New is in that crazy irregular feminine form because house is feminine. I know that's a new word for us. Don't worry about that. Again, you will not have to go from this to this, though. You will not have to go from English to French on your test. You will not have to produce these words in French. They are handsome. Again, the words for they are, that ils form of être is ils sont. And if you're describing a bunch of boys who are handsome, you have to use that really irregular masculine form where they add an X to make it plural instead of an S. And I used this one a moment ago. If you want to say he has a new computer, again, that form of avoir with he is il a, and then it would be nouvelle ordinateur. Even though ordinateur, computer, is masculine, you can't use that original nouveau form because then you'd be butting up right next to another vowel sound. So they use that very special masculine before a vowel sound, which is nouvelle. Do your best to jot these down and we'll practice them in class, but don't panic about memorizing them.